So solidarity and global connectedness. Thank you so much. Dr. Murli Desai, please take over the session chair and start the session. Thank you so much.
Very good afternoon to everyone. Let me start by congratulating Dr. Habibur Rahman, the Community Social Work Practice and Development Foundation, and the Department of Sociology and Social Work of the People's University of Bangladesh for organizing this 4th International Conference on the occasion of the World Social Work Day. I'm very delighted to be invited to chair this session because this combination of sustainable development, social work, and community resilience is very close to my heart. In my long decades of work in social work education, I have seen several changing paradigms in social work. When I was a student, social development was far from the horizon, and we were talking about social welfare more than anything else. Over the years, the understanding has grown, and today, mainly in developing countries, I heard some very good discussion about developed versus developing countries in the morning session, with again my favorite speakers, Malcolm Payne and Teo Tong, sharing their ideas and very good question answers. And Bangladesh being the organizer of this conference, the discussion had to be at that level of, very stark similarities as well as differences between so-called developed and developing countries. So coming back to developing countries and understanding of role of social work, social development has to be the major goal. What else is social work all about in countries that are not developed, quote unquote, okay? And yes, we are not talking about economic development. We are talking about social development. The paradigm that has moved far away from just looking at index of GDP and all the quantitative measures and all the ideologies of liberalism and international financial institutions and their role and so on. Social development is not the same, thankfully, and thankfully to so-called South countries in the UN that has changed this paradigm from economic to social development, thanks to the post-colonialism way of thinking about development, and where developing, the word also is a question mark. But a lot of newer ideologies like ecologism, multiculturalism, feminism, which are not just the ideologies of the previous colonies, but today truly the global ideologies where all over the world countries have contributed. And these ideologies have brought about this paradigm of social development, where we are not only talking about the economic progress of any country, we are talking about role of states, civil society, all the systems towards human development, the whole index of human development, with its importance of investment in human beings through education and health, basically. Today is the global paradigm for social development. And of course, recently, after the Millennium Development Goals, now we have the language of Sustainable Development Goals from 2015 to be achieved by 2030. But basically, we are moving in the direction of social development all over the world. And therefore, social work has a very important role to play in achieving the sustainable development goals of poverty eradication, health and education for all, environmental sustainability, and so on. And I wish more and more conferences focus on social development, sustainable development goals, and role of social work. As far as role of social work is concerned, community plays a major role. We have inherited the Western paradigm of social work, but like the morning session discussed, today we have only a global paradigm. We have influenced each other so much that we cannot really say now this was Western and this is Asian or Eastern and so on. But community centers as a major nodal systems for achievement of sustainable development goals by social has to be an important system to be taken into consideration, which can make the service provision universal as well as integrated. So this combination of social sustainable development, role of social work, and community resilience. I look forward to a lot of very interesting presentations and very interesting, valuable discussions. So we can now move to inviting different presenters. Is that what the organizers will do?
Professor Desai, Professor Denison, Debra Efroymson, Professor Ghosh, Professor Salma Akhter, and Mentor Ashif. Welcome to this plenary session. And you know, today, just at 10 a.m. Bangladesh time, we had a wonderful opening today. Professor Barbara Sheng, Professor Malcolm, Professor Tiong, Professor Mariko, Professor Ghulam Ahmadbor, Mark, so many actually a scholar and participant and professor just attended today in the morning in the opening and the keynote session. And this is the first plenary session. I, on behalf of this organizing committee of our 4th International Conference on Social Solidarity, Strengthening Social Solidarity, Community Resilience and Global Connectedness, myself, social worker Habibur Rahman, wholeheartedly welcome you to just continue this session on the first plenary. I would request Professor Murli Desai, dear audience, dear ladies and gentlemen, those who are watching and will be watching this video later on, we are very honored to have our honorable session chair, Professor Desai. She is former professor of TISS and she has so many involvement globally. So Professor Murli Desai, I'm really honored. My team is honored to have you here as a session chair. We have the first plenary speaker, Professor Datuk Denison Jayasooria. You know, Professor Jayasooria is actually SDGs Global expert. Professor Denison, welcome to this plenary session as the speaker. We are very honored to have you here today. And Professor P.K Ghosh, Dada, welcome. Welcome to this plenary, first plenary. We are really honored that you all are actually joined. It might have some trouble really to join because there are so many sessions and you know just a minute ahead we have that message that the whole country might be under lockdown situation starting from 5th of, but as this is virtual, we will continue virtually, just have keeping safety measure. Dear audience, we have Professor Salma Akhter. Always we mention madams that she's our Cambridge Salma. Actually, madam is well known around the world. Madam, welcome to this plenary session. And Debra Efroymson, Debra Bhabi, we always say, dear audience, and she's a very lovely lady, guardian, always inspire us, Debra Efroymson, and she is actually inspiring around. And Mentor Ashif, actually he's my big brother, he's my mentor, he is friend of mine, Dr. Ashif. They all will speak, and to discuss, and Dr. Sakthi will join later on, and Mokhles Rahman, if they have time, they will join us discussing. So I'd like to hand over the cheering to Professor Murli Desai. As our time after next approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes. So honorable session chair, I'd like to request you to just divide the timing. It might be 10 to 15 minutes each speaker so that all can speak and share their views correctly and we can have some questions. So that's from me. Professor Desai, please. This is your turn. to invite the session
Thank you,
speaker.
Dr. Muhammad Habibur Rahman. And I like the way you add social worker before your name. You know, this is a very rare thing. But yes, it gives importance to your identity as a social worker. So yes, now I invite the first presenter, Dr. Jayasooria, to make his presentation on social economy in Malaysia society. Yes, I think we will have time enough only for 10 minutes per presentation so that there are more question answers. Thank you. Professor Jayasooria, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Desai. And the topic that I'm sharing is on social economy and Malaysian society, capturing the potential of people economy at the grassroots. And I think the Secretariat is helping me with the PowerPoint. If I say next, and I think I have to rush through it. Next, please. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Habibur Rahman, for this invitation and opportunity. I'm speaking of Malaysian experiences and policies in this context. The outline is quite straightforward. It looks at the social solidarity economy framework or alternative economies, something about Malaysian development agenda, legislation and policy environment, examples of cooperatives and social enterprises, and one case study of community forestry. And I end with some thoughts on the role of the social worker who is also a community worker in this context. Next. Now, in this equation, we have the public sector, we have the private sector, we have the voluntary sector, and the social solidarity economy sector is actually in between the voluntary and the private, because it's not business as usual. It has a social, environmental purpose. And it's different from the public sector and the voluntary sector because it sustains itself with a business model. And it's important for us to look at the different models of transformation in society. And the SSE economy is setting a new agenda, and in the COVID situation, much more. Next. Now, in the SSE economy, it's quite similar to the SDGs, and that's why the localizing of SDG using SSE framework would make it more practical. There are 5 dimensions: the triple bottom line, people, prosperity, planet, and 2 other principles of ethical, sorry, the spelling, it's ethical values and governance. And it's in that context that we are talking of socio-economic, a more balanced, holistic, inclusive, and there's a very strong collective dimension to this aspect of the economy. So it's not just profits for profit's sake, or it's not the new liberal agenda, but it brings a much stronger community and environmental focus as required in the SDGs. Next. Next. Yeah. In this, the Malaysian development policy is very strong, with 5-year development planning, looking at inclusiveness, equitable, multidimensional. It has a dimension of developing community and social-based enterprises, and the midterm review, and now we are moving into the 12th Malaysia Plan as well. Next. The government has actually a legislative framework, and while there is the framework, like most countries, on non-profit societies, there is also the registration for profit societies, and there is the cooperatives. So the social enterprise registration, like Korea, Philippines, some countries have introduced new legislative framework. Malaysia, they have to use the existing for-profit legislation and declare a social enterprise objective, which has environment and social objectives through an accreditation process. Next. So the entrepreneurship policy, it's not just on business, but inclusive, sustainable, community well-being. There's a dimension on cooperative and social enterprise. So developing an alternative to just private sector business model is something that's emphasized. Next. And here too, the cooperative model likewise highlights this, and this was launched recently to tap into the potential of cooperatives and its contribution to GDP and the size of the cooperatives and so forth. Next. The cooperatives likewise, as I mentioned, is fairly large, I think very much smaller than in Bangladesh and in South Asia, but nonetheless, it has the potential of the SSE in its context. Next. And some examples are the land settlement for landless that was developed, and the size of those cooperatives and its members, and savings mobilization in the rural areas is quite significant. Next. The Grameen replication in Malaysia, Amanah Ikhtiar, likewise from individual loans also moved into cooperative development, and it has over 380,000 women registered in the cooperative, and that also uses savings mobilization for investment as an alternative to private sector. Next. Pawn shops, which is the Islamic equivalent to conventional pawnbroking, is an alternative model, and this uses the cooperative or the Islamic legislation to provide this service to the poor, and especially it's become the poor person's bank. Next. And we had discussions with the cooperative minister, leadership, managerial competencies, cooperatives, building trust are quite central in this process. Next. Entrepreneurship or social enterprises is something that the government promoted. It didn't create a new legislation, but it created an accreditation system in which a business could declare it has a business model, but it is for the community and it's supporting the environment, and they then get some tax benefit as well as loans and so forth to develop the social and environmental impact through community work. Next. And this describes more details, but time doesn't allow us. We'll move on next. So a simple project that illustrates this in a good way, and I'll tell this very quickly. It's a forest-based community. Next. And this community, we can apply the SDG principles. You can read my paper and also this PowerPoint to capture indigenous people, forest users, justice for land, and various other themes of SDG 10, 15, 16, 17 that applies, and also in the context of conservation and use of the forest in a sustainable way. Next. It's located on the Borneo Island. It's in Sabah, on the very northern tip. Next. It's a mountain which was in dispute where there are over 3,000 people, 13 villages, and this forest was actually customarily held by the villagers, but it was given out, and through a protest, the people secured community ownership and tenure to the land, and then they developed it. Next. So identity and contestation was a major issue. Next. There was the people's movement and power exercising democratic rights and secured community ownership of the mountain and the forest. Next. They set up a community heritage trust. Unfortunately, it's all men who are the village leaders. Gender is a major issue here, but they said they will address it. Next. So from poverty, they moved into potential micro businesses at the village level. Next. And so these are community-based, which are linked to the forest, like nature walks, birds' nests, making of gongs, bee and honey, beads, and more traditional ecotourism and homestay, which was collectively undertaken by the 13 villagers in terms of community profit sharing and so forth. Next. So the nature walk, the swiftlets and income generation. Next. Village economy of different activities in different 13 villages. Next. And if we take the principles of solidarity economy and apply it in a way that it's not just for people profit, but for community enhancement and mutual development, there is potential in what grassroots communities are doing, and not isolating its neighbor, but fostering it at the micro level. Next. And this is my last slide, the role of the social and community worker. While many social workers in some contexts works with individual and family-based casework, there is the potential of working with local communities. Second, there is the creation of local economies, which is important in strengthening. And finally, the social worker in an advocacy role of linking micro to macro policies as well as human rights, and bringing SDGs, grassroots to macro policy dimension. With that thought, Professor Desai, that's it. I hope I kept within my 10 minutes, and during Q&A, we can discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Jayasooria. This is a very valuable case study from poverty to micro businesses. Excellent learnings for social work, education, and practice. Thank you very much. May I now invite Professor P.K. Ghosh.
Good afternoon.
Yes, you're here. Good afternoon, Professor Ghosh. How are you?
I'm fine.
We are going to hear now a very different presentation on Rabindranath Tagore and his views on sustainable development. Welcome, Professor Ghosh.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. It's my pleasure. I'm not going, because you are giving 10 minutes time, so I'm not going to make the whole presentation. So I will skip this slide, so rather confine myself to the crux of what Tagore tried out 100 years ago and how it is being tried out today. It's a relevance to social work profession. That's what is my thanks to the organizers for inviting me and considering Tagore's model of sustainable development as one of the topic in this conference. To begin with, let me go back to the 1890s. In fact, Tagore's experiment in rural reconstruction started when Tagore was just 29 years old. In the year 1890, he was entrusted to look after the properties. In fact, they were the landlord then, and having their estates in Potishar, Pabna district, and Silaidaho, both are in Bangladesh right now. So the host has, I think, considered this component of the Ghosh experiment in sustainable development, which began in Bangladesh in 1890s, late 1890s. And he tried with, while traveling to the communities, what Tagore found that most of the people, the subjects, who were suffering from illiteracy, ill health, and poverty, three main problems he observed. And observing these three issues, he thought of doing something as a responsible citizen as well as landlord. I think started his social responsibility in Birhampur and other small pockets, where he tried to organize the farmers to try with different kinds of variety. That is a farming business, remodeling the farming systems, which just now presented as micro business, from poverty to micro business by my co-presenter from Malaysia. That is also there in Tagore that I am coming to. So he thought of this thing, but anyhow, it was not being materialized. Most of the experiments he carried on in Bangladesh and his estate areas were failing because of the people's skills in managing the institutions and the organizations that Tagore was trying to float in the areas. Anyhow, he was successful in introducing the night schools for the education of the poor, education of the farmers, education of the people who really need the help and assistance to live a good quality of life. So in in between he visited, I think, Sweden, Russia, and these places where he saw how people have developed their micro business and developed the cooperative models, which could be ideal for Indians too, to carry on taking its values, social and cultural values. So in 1922, he formally begins with experiments in rural reconstruction in Sriniketan, just adjacent to Santiniketan, where he had founded the educational institute called Brahmacharya Ashram, now it's called Pata Bhavana. And there he started Visva Bharati also in 1921 as Institute of Higher Education. And 1922 starts with rural reconstruction, with the objectives of bringing back life in its completeness into the villages, making the rural folk self-reliant and self-respectful, acquainted with the cultural tradition of their own country, and competent to make an efficient use of modern resources for their social, cultural, and intellectual improvement. So that was the major objective of Sriniketan experiment, and it invites Leonard K. Elmhurst, one of the British citizens who studied agriculture from Cornell University, met sometimes in New York, and asked him to come and join this experiment. He came, and he was the first director of Sriniketan experiment, a foreigner, well, started work with the local workers. In fact, Tagore had in his mind that education would be holistic when we combine our education to our practice learning. What are the issues and concerns today in the communities that has to be studied, and the students will study, visit the communities, and bring the issues and problems to the classroom, discuss and find the solutions. So he founded the Institute of Rural Reconstruction with agriculture, with focus on development of agriculture and farming systems, with allied occupations like animal science, dairying, poultry, and other allied occupations, whatever were there. Second is that he thought of education that could enlighten these poor people to develop their knowledge and skills, to bring in change in their attitude, as well as adapt themselves to different kinds of practices that could help or improve the quality of life. And he thought of building organization. That was the focus of his experiment, and how it relates to social work. I shall come to the end part. Building organization and cooperatives were found to be the most suitable. He wrote a small book which is available, Cooperative Principles. With his observation and understanding on cooperative models of the European and Asian countries, he developed his own model, Indian model of cooperative principles, how the cooperative would survive, how the cooperatives would be developed and sustained by the people for their own development. It started with health cooperatives, where the health of the people would be taken care of by themselves, by combining a cluster of communities, making members of each one in the community, whole family, 10 villages, still one health center, health cooperative is operating in the area where P.K Ghosh started his first experiment in 1922. That health cooperative is now more than 80 years old and still working, more than 80 years, sorry. It was developed in 1937. And then there were some 10 such health cooperatives covering 180 communities surrounding this university. And university workers, university students were responsible for that. He then thought of having access to credit to the people. And it's a credit cooperative bank still there with more than 200 credit cooperatives spread over in 180 villages. The big villages, the communities which were bigger had more than one credit cooperatives affiliated to the central cooperative, where from the bank, and he had put his Nobel Prize money also for the use of because that time the people taking loan from the moneylenders had to pay an exorbitant rate of interest while paying back. It was 1.5 almost, 1.5. So that was reduced by the people's effort themselves by subscribing them to be a member of the credit cooperative. They could get a loan at a very lower rate of interest, and whatever the income that were generated in the cooperatives were shared by the members, the people. All are members. Also, this, I think, recycling the fund which is with the people, used by the people, coming back to the people in the form of services or in the form of profit. Such sustainable development he thought of, and he always believed that anything that is imposed on from outside is likely to harm more than the benefit. Because any outside help, that is the experience of the West, as we have seen in social work, we have seen in other countries also. When you give more and more help to the people, they become more dependent. The tendency to be more dependent on the aids and assistance, which he discouraged and said, let us build the capacities of the people. He wanted the Sriniketan workers to be trained first, because he believed there is nothing so dangerous as inexpert service. If we want to serve, we must learn. And I think social work is doing that. Before serving people, and this was his conviction and belief that we must learn to serve. That service which sustains for a longer time. And that's why he organized cottage industry centers in Sriniketan for upgradation of the traditional skills of the rural artisans, potters, carpenters, blacksmiths, cobblers, all were called to take a course applying technology. Weavers, Swedish looms were imported, small and very effective. Then he brought in leather work from London studio, his son, of course, Ratindranath, and started doing it, make a very special Shantani Kitani leather bags. Pratima Devi, his daughter-in-law, bringing batik from Java, my former speaker, Malaysia, batik and Java and the Sumatra, and they learn from there and starts training in Sriniketan Cottage Industry Center, where the first focus is to upgrade the traditional skills of these rural artisans in and around this area, as well as import other skills from other countries to impart training and from this institute. It is called Shilpo Shadan.
Mr. Ghosh, can I request you to conclude now?
Yeah. No,
Thank
you have
you.
given me 35. Yeah. So okay, I shall. Yeah. So with that kind of initiatives, he had a number of cooperatives with weavers cooperative, farmers cooperative, granary, so that a support system and mechanisms, that is rural organizations for rural development, including organizing the youth in the form of Bruti Balak, boys and girl scouts, farmers recreation club, all these were, and Mahila Shamitis. I think these are all his efforts were in the macro level. All his interventions were macro level and organized. It is an organizational services, and he believed in that the more rural organizations would be the vehicle for rural development, which will be made by the people, sustained by people, maintained by people, and used by the people for their, without being dependent on the state and welfare agencies as we are doing today. And the farm system, we have a full college of agriculture with 12 departments, including Krishi Vigyan Kendra. So the activities of this experiment has been extended to more and more villages. We have regular interface with the community people, social work, especially we place our students 2 days a week in the nearby communities, and at least 2 years during the 5 years course, or 3 years in 5 years course of studies. And what we find is that the ultimately, when we try to compare it to social work intervention and Tagore's intervention, which is based on the strength of the people, based on the resources of the community, based on the competencies of the people, and building their competencies, empowering them, organizing them, and making it sustainable, I think makes all the way what we do in social work today. With this brief, I would stop here. Thank you, madam. Thank you for reminding me my time limit to 10 minutes. In fact, my presentation was in some 16 slides, but I just kept that because I know I won't be able to manage the time if I go point-wise. Thank you very much. Thank you, listeners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ghosh, for reminding us that sustainable development, cooperatives, women's empowerment, all these are not newer issues.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we go back to history, we have so many initiatives, and especially Rabindranath Tagore needs a chapter in our history book on social work. Absolutely. Thank you very much. May I now invite Professor Salma Akhter to make her presentation on gender, power, and social capital in Bangladesh, particularly. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, the session chair, discussants, and the distinguished audience. Can you hear me, please?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to go for the sharing my slides. I would like to present few slides and then go for the open discussions. দেখো তোমরা স্ক্রিনটা শেয়ার করছো না? Have a look. Can you see the slides, please?
Yes, madam.
Okay. Thank you so much. The main topic of this discussion is actually gender, power, and social capital in Bangladesh. And the paper particularly focuses on the people's representative, female people representative in Bangladesh in the parliament, in the sub-district level, which is called Upajila, and also in the local governments level, which is called Union Parishad, who are elected by a quota system. So this paper actually will focus on how this quota system, which is part of a social, we know the gender equity approach, moving from the gender equality that Bangladesh government was following earlier, whether this has given women any mandate and any opportunities in the power practice in Bangladesh. So on basis of reviewing some of the global literature on the quotas and how the social capital can actually work instead of manpower and money, which is so much integral part of politics, both in rural and urban areas in Bangladesh. So this paper will actually focus on that. This is an empirical study based on several Union Parishad, Upajila Parishad, and also parliamentarians. How this is related to SDGs and why this is important to relate this to SDGs. We know in SDGs, one of the major goals is to ensure women's participation and leadership in decision making and adopt and strengthen policies and legislation. So these two are very much related to this paper, and we know the people's representatives activities include mostly and also very much intensely regarding the social safety network. So this then relate this to the social work and social services. The Constitution of Bangladesh has given equal rights for both men and women to participate actively in all spheres of public lives, and government has accordingly accorded special emphasis on programs to promote women's development in the 7th and 6th five-year plans, in addition to the SDGs, and also have developed a national women's policy. Why quota system is important? We know that, as I mentioned, that quota is a way to ensure the equity. So as Bangladeshi women had been lagging far behind than men in the arena of politics. So quota is a way to give them an opportunity to participate in the political activities and then also make their own social capital and empower as a whole. So Bangladesh initiations of quota in parliament, Upajila system and Union Parishad was part of a wide global move towards kickstart process of women's political empowerment, increasing accountability and to women through creation of a critical mass of women's political participation. And the central argument behind this promotion was that women's political participation through quotas will bring a stronger political participation, leads to better representation and accountability, and gradually to a transformation and deepening of democratic policies, as UNIFEM, now UNWomen, was predicting earlier. And this also goes with in line with the Millennium Development Goal 3, which was to promote gender equity and empower women. And we know that this was also to increase women's political power over the 2000s. And the electoral system and political party competition in Bangladesh is very much not that friendly towards women. And we know that in the quota system, we have seen the proportional representation. Electoral systems are gradually more gender equitable than simple majority systems, such as Bangladesh parliamentary system. So while women constituted only 18% of national legislatures in simple majority systems, the figure was 27.5% in the countries where the peer systems was introduced in 2004, according to a UNDP report. So we see that after this legislation and the quota system, actually Bangladesh came at the top 3 Asian countries in terms of women representation in rural and urban council, reflects the presence of quotas in the Union Parishad and Paurasabha and Upajila system. So there is a debate actually regarding how quota can support women, or that's actually go in disfavor of women. So there are 3 major discussions. That first one is, do quota in fact increases women's representation with enough women willing and qualified to participate to represent society in a more diverse way? Or will women feel unwilling or unqualified to stand or reluctant to be selected as women? The second, substantive representation, will quotas lead to a more women-friendly way of doing politics, enabling new and more gender-sensitive policy concerns to arise to the agenda? Or will the political effectiveness of women politicians be limited because they only represent women and as stigmatized as quota women? or stand as proxies or token women without clear mandates of their own. The third is systematic representation. Will quotas contribute to the democratization of politics by widening nomination process and increasing the legitimacy of electoral systems from the representative of including women? Or will quotas be merely symbolic and lead to demands for quotas among other social groups? So when we move towards the discussion of women and UP members' accountability and how they're forming social capital, the paper was focusing on how they were mobilizing public opinion to secure a mandate for actions that promote gender equity through policy and implementation changes, or whether they were establishing local relevant standards for the implementation of policies of relevance to the promotion of gender equity, or whether they were monitoring local services that matter to women and gender equity. For example, by ensuring women are made aware of, involved in audits of local budgets, spending plans, they're participating in the plans, and also the social safety net programs, whether women have their voices. And also whether they're sanctioning failures to operate within the law, including by demanding answers from the local political system, and also whether they were building social capital, both horizontally and vertically. The key findings of the study shows that though women citizens were feeling empowered to vote for the female Union Parishad and Upazila Parishad members, and they were considering them in the way of patronage, not all the union vice chairs or the Union Parishad's women were operating in the level of patronage. And women vice chairs and Union Parishad members had considerable experience of civil society organizations, as we have seen that some of the participants in who won the election actually were coming from very poor strata of the rural women who didn't have money, didn't have manpower, but making use of their social networks, making use of their NGO membership, they were elected in the election. But after being elected in the election, we have seen that they were not being that able of using the capacity building of women EP members to contribute more politically effectively working with the NGOs. And also at the same time, they were not actually making that much relationship horizontally with the government officials and civil societies, and vertically not with the Union Parishad members and the MPs at the national level. So the problem was one of the issues where they were in competition of making use of the same resources for the social safety nets for poorest women and poor women, and they were actually taking 3 times more masses than men as they were competing in 3 wards or 3 constituencies compared to men. So they were actually competing more on showing their relationships and their contribution towards the social safety net program, which were actually at the same time done by the Union Parishad members and the MPs at the national level. So the personal political connection with the MPs were very much important for women, for being nominated, stand, getting funds for the campaigns, and operate at the local political environment. While connections to party politics were important, these were because of political system factors, the need of finance and the faction support to win, and the patriarchy attitude that challenges women's stereotypical roles, and not women were not being seen as the political political party leaders earlier. So these were very much needed for getting MP support and local support. And there were gender risks operate here to ensure that political connected women were likely to be considerably advantageous compared to the women without such connections. So what were the major obstacles? We interviewed the Union Parishad, Upazila Parishad members, the government officials, and also other mass population. So first of all, they were saying the one major issue is the power is actually delegated from the center, not coming within the people. At the same time, where they're working in the standing committees, they had lack of knowledge regarding the legal provision. Also, they were resistant to oversight, accountability mechanisms, and also there were overlapping responsibilities within the law for the MPs, Union Parishad members, and the Upazila Parishad members. And lack of authority over departmental activities whose funds programs are delivered directly from the center over the Union Parishad and Upazila had very little power, formal power, even when they were fully operational. And also the effective absence of authority of women vice chairs and union parishad members to place an item and agenda in the official meetings. So the findings were actually showing here that there were no strong interest for the male union parishad members or the male counterparts of the Upazila and union parishad to actually empower women in the constituencies, empower women in the standing committees. And they were themselves also not being able to make that level of citizen interaction at the village level due to the distance, due to their far large constituency, due to lack of information and due to lack of resources. And at the same time, their relationship with the MP also hampered their political powers and their connections with the mass population. As the relationship with the MPs were perceived as very resourceful for the people, for the women as such. So there at the same time were a kind of hidden political power relationship with them, because some of the Upazila Parishad females were competing for the MP, some of the union Parishad were competing for the Upazila Parishad. So instead of making a social capital between themselves, they were rather competing against themselves, within themselves, because of the going for the higher ladder of the power. But how could this be converted into having a political benefit instead of having as a barrier? So we were suggesting that they can actually do capacity development and strengthen communications work, such as they can have accessible public awareness campaigns to widen and deepen awareness to provide information to the public about the Upazila and the Union Parishad. They can communicate with elite groups at the national level, include through roundtable discussions, seminars, and media work. They can do communication work across the core actors within the system. They should avoid describing, listening the legally mandated activities of the Upazila actors and public administrative training trends. Instead, they can look into the questions of representations and accountability in a more holistic and a more imaginative way. And they can do capacity development of Union Parishad and Upazila Parishad representatives, such as going for beyond the traditional training, peer-to-peer learning, and also how to manage meetings, draft resolutions, handle difficult situations, get technical knowledge, and partnership, building partnership, working relationship for social accountability, and having more exposure to accountability tools and techniques. So, and having more awareness regarding the laws and public policies regarding gender.
Yeah, please conclude now.
Yeah, I'm almost at the end. So we were actually looking into the fact that instead of fighting for the local financial resources, actually women union parishad members, Upazila Parishad members, and MPs can create their own social capital and work at the national level in a different way, bringing their own mandate for working for the population. And we were suggesting that at this level, it will be very difficult to say that whether quota has empowered them or given them a more burdensome work. Maybe we can go for more research works, a very light touch qualitative research work, roundtable discussions, and bringing these three actors in the horizontal level, vertical level, as well as the horizontal actors onto the same table to see how social capital can actually replace the place of money and power and the political agenda, and women can actually find a way out of their own social capital and can bring a sustainable power. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Akhter. This study is extremely useful for policy making, for political participation of women, not only in Bangladesh, but in most of Asia. The problems sound so similar, and challenges actually, the more we do, the more we need to do. And absolutely valuable way to go about studying this and then, making recommendations for stronger policies. Thank you very much. May I now invite Professor Debra, I can't pronounce your last name. You're going to have a fresh look at the SDGs. Yeah, welcome. Can I request, start with the slide. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Debra Efroymson. I know no one can pronounce my name, no problem. We've been talking a lot about the SDGs. I just want to back up a bit and ask, we assume that this is possible. These are our goals. How possible actually is sustainable development? Next. So the idea of sustainable development is that it's ecologically sustainable. And I certainly don't argue with most of the SDGs as positive goals, depending on how we define them. For instance, end poverty. What do we actually mean about poverty? But we also know that included in the SDGs is goal 8. I certainly agree with decent work, but it also talks about economic growth. And specifically, there's a goal of 7% GDP per year growth in the least developed countries. So we've talked about that earlier in this conference, but the focus should not be on GDP. It should be on social well-being. And yet, specifically GDP is mentioned in the SDGs, which gives the false idea that we can grow our economies, have social well-being and a good environment, and that we don't have to choose. And I'm suggesting that's a very dangerous belief. Next. So unfortunately, when we talk about sustainable development within the definition of the SDGs, we're looking at GDP, which again is production and consumption. It is not well-being. And the idea that our economies can develop sustainably, that our GDP can keep growing, is based on the experience of the last few decades. The last few decades is a blink in the eye of human history. And if you think about it, just in the last 3 decades, how many global or huge regional financial crashes have we had? 1990 Southeast Asia, 2007-8 internationally, and now with coronavirus. That's basically 1 every 10 or 12 years. So even within the last few decades, we've seen that this is not even economically sustainable. And when we talk about developed versus developing countries, if you look at the United States, which a lot of people said is their dream, with about 5% of the global population, the United States uses 25% of the world's fuel. So clearly not a sustainable model. Next. It's a nice idea. It sounds very good that we're going to balance economy, environment, and social justice. The question is, when there is a conflict, which one will take priority? In fact, this idea that they work together, this idea of the triple bottom line, only works if all 3 benefit simultaneously, but it's mathematically actually impossible to maximize 2 or more variables at the same time. So talking about the triple bottom line, although it sounds good, it does not actually guide us in real decision making. Next. In fact, as I think everyone is aware, the triple bottom line very quickly deteriorates to become the single bottom line of money. Why is that? There are a few reasons. For one thing, money is real. It's easier to measure. It's very hard to measure the value of a forest or a river, clean water. A lot of the people who are concerned about the environment refuse to play the valuation game because they know that that can be used to justify the destruction of something that has infinite value, something natural. Also, unfortunately, those with the most power are the wealthiest. And internationally, there's actually a question, can we have democracy with so many billionaires? As the number of billionaires grows, their power to distort this whole equation grows. And of course, there's an issue, and we've seen this with the climate crisis and the failure to respond, which is people live in the present, and it's very difficult to understand the importance of the future, not to mention that it's actually devalued in economics. Next. So just, I'm not going to read all these. We know that there's some major consequences. Look out our windows. Believing that economics is the most important bottom line is actually destroying our planet, destroying the very foundation of our life, as well as all the other lives on this planet that we share it with. Next. So why do people talk about ecologically sustainable development? Again, I won't read through the whole list, but clearly anything where there's a problem, there's probably someone benefiting. So why do we have war? Companies that sell arms benefit from war. Why do we have environmental devastation? People are benefiting from it. So when we say we can have it all, there is no need to make choices. A lot of agencies, governments, UN agencies, billionaires, they all benefit. And we don't have to make changes or big decisions. We don't have to make sacrifices. We kind of lose our concern about the future. And people like it, common people like it, because we're actually saying that being selfish or greedy or being focused on consumerism is positive. Just go out and shop more and everything will be fine. Next. We see it play out very specifically. I get this all the time in Bangladesh, that we feel good about doing things that actually are not very helpful, like throwing our trash in the proper place or planting trees, despite the fact that there's plastic island in the ocean and forests are being destroyed. And again, it suggests that everyone can get their way, that there's no need for conflict. And on a really sad note, but this is certainly true, the sustainable development field offers some wonderful job opportunities. People get high salaries and respect. Before coronavirus, we got to travel. You got to feel good about yourself without having to question any of your core beliefs. So moving from what is not very helpful to what would be a lot more helpful, what would be sustainable, first of all, would be to understand that economics cannot stand by itself. It should actually be a subset of ecology. There's a phrase called spaceship Earth, which is acknowledging that the Earth has limited resources and also a limited capacity to absorb waste. So we can't just keep trashing our planet and exploiting all the resources that have built up over millions of years. That's not sustainable. There's a circular economy, which is a closed circle as opposed to the straight line of extracting, producing, and disposing, which would be far more sustainable. And rather than focusing so much on what people want or the perceived needs, which are actually not true needs, it would be helpful if we highlighted actual needs. One of the things we don't even talk about, the fact that millions of people die from air pollution, so we're actually poisoning ourselves by breathing. That should be a international emergency. And yet we treat it as normal, that we can't breathe the air, we can't drink the water, people don't have shelter, they don't have food, we're destroying the soil, we're destroying our biodiversity. And certainly now with coronavirus, we're also realizing the importance of human contact and sociability that we've largely lost. Next, and this is my last slide, other than the credits. It would also help, there's the tradition, I believe in Nepal and probably other places, of 7-generation thinking. So you go back 3 generations and you go forward 3 generations. And most of the environmental damage we've done on the planet has been since the 1950s and a lot of it since the 1980s. So if we just go back a couple generations, or even to when some of us were children, things were very, very different. Kids walked to school or cycled to school. Back in the 1950, plastics were only just being widely used. Things look very, very different. And if we go further back, obviously they look even more different. So we've had human life on this planet for hundreds of thousands, lakh years. How did our ancestors survive without all those hundreds of thousands of years without trashing the planet? And in what situation are we leaving it for our grandchildren? Can we focus more on community and on future generations, not on our own individual selfishness, what we need, what we want? One very practical example is Bhutan, which focuses not on gross domestic product, but rather on gross national happiness, or what I would call gross national well-being. So it's not, these things are not, it's not rocket science. It's not that we have to explore and find these things newly. As I said, Bhutan's doing this, but also people have been on this planet for a very long time without destroying it. It's this new belief in economic growth and that we can have it all that is leading to all this destruction. If we reorient our beliefs, there is a positive way forward. Next, just want to share quickly the references. So there's lots more information out there. I've written an entire book about the economics of well-being. I encourage people also to visit my website, and we have a YouTube channel where we have a lot of videos. To me, there's a very helpful message, but that helpful message is buried under a lot of unwillingness to discuss, honestly, the unsustainability of the path that we're on. So I hope we can reflect more seriously about what we need, what we want, and how we can move forward and protect the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Debra. Yes, this is very thought-provoking. You know, everything appears so nice, and now we are moving from the economic paradigm to the social paradigm, but are we really? And yes, we need a lot of reflections on what are we really talking about behind the facade of social development. Thank you very much. Can I move to now the last presentation by Mr. Mentor Ashif? Is that right? And he's going to talk about mentoring. Welcome, Mr. Ashif.
Thank you very much. Thank you, our Honorable Chairperson, Ms. Murli Desai, for your continuous support to the presenters. Actually, I need your help. Just before 2 minutes, please just show your face so that I can understand that my time will be finished within 2 minutes. So that will be very, very important to me. So a little bit of controversial things I am working. So might be it gives some controversy, but this is my belief. So I want to say my words, not the people's words. That is why social mentoring, I believe, a prerequisite for sustainable development. That is very, very important. Mentoring is a learning relationship. The primary purpose of mentoring for their mentees is to drive personal growth, build skills, help seek knowledge, and explore understanding. The expectation from a mentor is to extract their knowledge, power, and influence to assist in achieving mentees' desired objectives. Most humans and organizations have a common objective. They both want to do better. It is becoming harder for one to succeed without the other, and harnessing success both ways will allow both to achieve greater accomplishments. Solving the human equation is the cornerstone of cultivating great culture, because I'm a believer of great culture. It is where the mentor plays their role of not only provide advice, but building growth relationships between each party. The pandemic is an eye-opener to the world, and I'm always a believer that pandemic is a blessing to us, and displayed vividly the divided world of three factions: developed, developing, and underdeveloped. In such artificial boundaries, the world economy, hijacked by a few people, continued their proclamation of third world countries not being par with the first world. The further demonstrates samples of their success with case studies of Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore, like Philippines also. But China broke the norm by becoming a superpower economically and socially in just 30 years. I know they have so much trouble in their own way, but without the first world's help, the Chinese culture promoted unity. That is the most important thing, unity. Family, we are the believer of family, social harmony, and acceptability in the global market. This is in contrast to the promotion of first world's individualistic success vision, which is unsustainable and increases inequality. Such intervention causes the common people to become success watchers without any contribution to be success builders. The Sustainable Development Goals by UNDP currently behaves like, in my point of view, just like angel investors in the economy, where premium countries and their leaders are showing kindness to the common countries. The result is cosmetic, where this perception is polluting the environment and promoting dissatisfaction among the common people. But there is a benefit to the first world. By promoting these dependencies, the resolution devised is war and giving aid to crippled people in common countries. This is the vicious cycle we have seen for over 100 years. It is time to realign the mainstream voice by including many silent voices instead of a few loud ones. Corona has cleared our vision and has given us the opportunity to know our strength, potential, and culture without the intersecting eyes of so-called intellectuals of premium countries. The answer is social mentoring. This is a promoting and creating our own strength circle. We believe that we have our own strength by initiating the most important movement, education, by promoting enlightenment, experience, and expansion of education. We're able to learn solutions to each problem at hand and promote the best possible decisions aligned to our humans, our systems, and our cultures that work best. The first to focus is on the primary and secondary levels, who are the backbone of our transforming future. The next to upskill and standardize professionals with deep insights, higher performance, and engaging productivity. The third is to support entrepreneurs and enterprises in developing quality innovations for the common economy, markets, and their consumers. To establish and fulfill the SDG education dream, education mentoring must start from the front line of our honorable teachers as our social mentors and senior citizens with their wisdom and experience, irrespective of their formal education. I'm not a good supporter of formal education all the time. I'm a believer of natural education. Through their support, we can build a nation of wisdom, experience, and humanity to encourage voice, belief, and capability in our young generation who are moral and kind to another. This will surely cause a ripple effect to other 16 SDG goals and perhaps give birth to more human goals. This is my belief. What do you think, my dear honorable audience? Thank you very much. Dear ma'am, I'm finished. I do not, just unmute yourself, please. Just unmute, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashif. Very important points, but I thought you still have more to say. Well, maybe we can have questions for you later on. Okay, so we have had all the 6 presentations, and now we have discussants. So can I invite now Mr. Mokhles Rahman to share his points? Is he here?
Professor and Chairman, Dr. Murli, actually,
Yes.
Mokhles Rahman Safrai could guess he cannot attend. He was in the morning session. So there is Dr. Sakthi Prabha as honorable discussant of the session.
Okay.
And after her, you can have some queries or comments from the
All
audience.
right. So I invite Dr. Sakthi Prabha to raise some discussion points. Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the chair of the session, Murli Desai, ma'am, and the conference organizer, Professor Habibur Rahman, and all the professors and practitioners from the several parts of the country. So at this outset, I want to congratulate all the speakers for the wonderful presentation of the papers. So each and every topic presented in this plenary session was very, very interesting and very innovative also. So it was very much realistic. That's what I felt when I was listening to your entire presentation. So there were many topics which I think you traveled on the timeline. You went back and you came to the future, and you're talking about the future which is going to come also. So it was totally on the timeline I was able to travel. The presentation on the topic social solidarity and sustainable social development was complete with this. I think all the all the 5 papers, and I just want to highlight few points by all the speakers. So I'm very honored to be here, but I know all are very senior and experienced social worker here. So it's my blessing, I think, to be here to share my thoughts on this presentation. The presentation done by Professor Datuk, he gave emphasis on small business organizations and role of social workers in local country. I think this is the most important need of the day, where we really have to concentrate on social enterprise development. That is the field. So the topic was very informative and very knowledgeful. The presentation done by Professor P.K. Ghosh, so he has taken back to our college days where we studied all the Tagore model and Sriniketan experiments. So the indigenous model has been given importance. So in social work, we have to follow both the indigenous model as well as the latest current trends. I think this conference has brought a connected on the both. So every country has its own indigenous practices. So Professor Ghosh made us know, he has re-emphasized on this Tagore model of sustainable development and what are the different poverty models and Indian cultures and all. So I think the people who have not been heard much of Rabindranath Tagore can get a little bit orientation on the Sriniketan experiment. So it would have been a high opener for many social work practitioners and professors and the students from all over the world. The next paper by Professor Salma Akhter was very, very different and important paper. This is the time we are, for a very long time, we are talking about this gender equality, power and quota. So it was a very new for me for knowing more about Bangladesh. And I could see, I think I remember even our chair repeating that there was a lot of similarity. So even I felt that. So there was quite a similarity between Bangladesh and India. And you rightly pointed out the status of women, power, and what is the happening and what is the interventions which is necessary to change. And I think you highlighted the importance on communication and capital development, which is very important. The next speaker on Professor Debra, the presentation on sustainable development relooking, really it was very heart-touching. She went on a very realistic perspective, because every time we talk about sustainable development, but the possibility of the sustainable development is very important, what we really have to think. So she highlighted in all the perspective, from social perspective to ecological perspective to economic perspective, and importance of the ecology as the part of economics, both goes together. And she highlighted on multi-generational thinking, which is very important. And she also highlighted how important to look back the best practices, what our ancestors had. So I think this is a time we have to look back to our earlier practices, right from the generation. When we go inside the Indian history, we see so many kind of sustainable development strategy taken and water management strategy done. The same thing now we are discussing, but it has been done in a very long years back. So I think it's a time we have to look back into the the practices, the intervention done by all our our prior generation, and that can be a very good role model for us, as well as we have to leave this planet as it is to our future generation without exploiting. It was a very very heart-touching topic, and really I think we really need to think on this. The next topic by Mentor Ashif sir, it was a new topic, sir. It was very interesting on social mentoring, and how I think this pandemic has really opened a lot of avenues for all of us, and it has brought a lot of people together, and all the topic presented in this sessions were very good, and they highlighted all important interventions. That is more important. Stop talking about the problems. We have to look into the interventions. I think this was a good platform to understand the different models practiced in the various countries, Malaysia, Bangladesh, India, and other countries. So I am very, very happy to be part of this conference. So thank you very much for your wonderful sharing on this paper presentation, and best wishes to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Prabha, for your very succinct observations of every presentation. And now we can have an open discussion. I see that there are no questions in the chat, so people can just raise their hand. Those who want to ask questions or make contributions to this particular theme, you can be specific about which author you're addressing, which speaker you're addressing, or you can make your own additional inputs to enrich the theme of today. While others are thinking, maybe I'll start. I want to ask a question to Mr. Ashif. Maybe I missed out, but I want to know, do you have any specific role in mind for social work practitioners and educators with reference to mentoring?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm mentoring the entrepreneurs. I'm mentoring the entrepreneurs, and now I'm mentoring the teachers, because I believe that education system should be more enlightening, more innovative, more interactive. So that's why I'm thinking that what actually, as I'm an international coach, and I do believe that people love to flourish, but only the mentoring and coaching can help them to flourish. Because always if we put our own thought and own intention on other, then ultimately that is not practical, that is implicable. And at this moment, what I believe that at this moment in Asia, always be the leader of this wisdom. So I am thinking that why our generations, because I am already from the lamp to the electricity, and because I have seen the lamp and that the ancient lamp, and now I'm utilizing the jubilee. So I know what my grandfathers actually showing the path of enlightenment. So here is social mentoring is very important. Social mentoring can give them the light. Where is the ditch? Where is the hole? And they can understand themselves to prove their uniqueness and through their alertness. So here the social mentoring is very, my two subject areas is teachers and entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Can I, Professor Desai, can I make an intervention? Although I didn't address that. I would thank you know, the speaker just now on the theme of mentoring. And one of the things as university professors as well as activists, we need to really make a commitment for next generational development. I think the problem, especially with Asia, I know Ashif was running down the West, but if you take the percentage of political leadership and age in Asia, it's always at the higher end, because we have the notion of elder and the young person keep quiet. But I'm looking at, let's say, football, then from striker to coach. So it's from activist to mentor. So especially those of us who are more senior, how do we groom and hand over the baton to the next generation? I think that's key. And many of us find it difficult, both in the academic world and especially in NGO circles, where we tend to hold on power too long, where people then throw us out or what. But I think this theme should come as part of leadership development, handing over and finding meaning to play the second fiddle role and not feel threatened, but as a coach, as a support, to encourage, to identify and nurture, like a father or a parent with their children. We have to let them go. And I think this theme is very significant and important. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jayasooria, for adding on to what Mr. Ashif has been sharing. Okay, who else would like to make an intervention? Professor Ghosh?
I was just listening to this sustainable development from all the speakers, and but I was looking at my own place when Tagore, started environmental education for the school children in 1905. Environmental education that they need, and they were taken once in a week out to the environment to see how soil erosion is taking place, where we need the greenery, what is the percentage of greenery we are having, and what we need to have. So these are the things which he thought of long back, being a poet and novelist, as you know, his field of contribution, but above all as a humanist and a social philosopher, that anyhow we are endangering the environment. So we need to make a balance between the advancement, technological advancement, as well as our environmental concerns. So that was, and he puts in education, wants to make it a complete one. It should be linked to the practice. It should never go beyond. And if the women in the village feel that they need home economics management would be their subject, let the university reach out there in the evening classes or afternoon classes for the women entrepreneur to be a good home and economic manager. Home and economic education. There was one of the training that used to be imparted from this institute earlier, but not now, no more. So these are all things which regarding education and our practice is a great concern. How do we make a balance between this sustainability of all development as well as vis-a-vis our concerns for the global warming and other things which are coming on the way as far as the physical environment and this earth is concerned.
Thank you, Professor Ghosh. What really, is I find most valuable about Tagore's work is the integrated approach. Over a period of time in social work, in NGOs, we become so specialized. We work with women, we work with children, then we work with the disabled. And therefore, we can't work on community development. Community comprises of everyone. And the way Tagore's rural reconstruction was totally integrated, comprehensive, all the stakeholders were included. And therefore, it was most valuable. Lots that we need to learn today when we are so specialized in different fields. Anyone else would like to raise any issue or ask questions to the speakers?
Yeah, I have something to ask.
Yes, Ruma Parveen, yes. Can we see your face, please?
Yeah, of course, why not?
Thank you.
You're most welcome. It's our pleasure having you all as a speaker. We are really very much delighted having wonderful scholars in one frame like Professor Salma Akhter, Professor Datuk, Jayasooria, Professor Ghosh sir, and other speakers, and our Honorable Session Chair, Murli Desai ma'am. I have a question to Professor Salma Akhter ma'am. I want to know that what kind of problems the Union Parishad women members faces when they want to have their position regarding the male members. Actually, is there any conflict happens in that cases? I have heard that they couldn't get their power actually in conflict to the male members. So what kind of problems they faces and how they get over from those problems? I want to know that.
Thank you, Ruma. Actually, the main issue is this is a very stereotypical idea that they haven't seen women as political leaders, and so far political leadership was seen as a very man's arena. And the Union Parishad members, they are mostly illiterate, very poor people from the very remote village areas who didn't have any public exposure beforehand. So whenever they are coming to the Union Parishad, I have done actually 3-4 studies. So chronologically, I can see in the initial days, they were not even getting access to any of the decision making. They were simply attending the programs. When there are the standing committees, women are supposed to chair some of those, but in name, their names were putting on, but they were not given any opportunity to take decisions. From the male Union Parishad members and the Upajila chair, the complaint was it was again a sort of another stereotypical issue that they were complaining that the female members were just coming into the meeting. They didn't take any decisions. Instead, their male family members, mostly husbands, were taking the decisions. They were taking over the power. So it was a male versus male initial days. And as these women were, we mentioned that in the patriarchal system, obviously they couldn't go beyond family support. They couldn't go beyond the the power structure inside the household. That was the case. Then many of the cases we have seen, their husbands are accompanying them. And one of the male-female members' husband was saying that the villagers address him as the membership, not his wife. He was addressed as the membership. So initial issue was lack of education, lack of access, lack of awareness, and all of this. So the suggestion I was making then, one of the major problem was actually they were struggling for sharing the resources for the social safety network, the social services. But this is not only the mandate of a political leader to just do the social services. They could actually do much better things, changing the mindset of the people, changing the system of the administrative system. So we were suggesting that that's the reason that my paper was suggesting, instead of focusing on that only, they could actually make more social capitals by doing awareness raising and doing more type of leadership activities. Only problem is that the villages in Bangladesh, they actually perceive either the member or the MP or the union Upajila Parishad, they actually perceive providing them the social safety net services is the main mandate of the political leadership. So the real leadership, decision making and changing mindset and changing social stereotypes, they couldn't do that. So there is a huge hurdle. Now, the second time when they were elected, we found many of the women who participated in the first time election, they didn't compete in the second election because they were saying we couldn't satisfy our constituents because we couldn't give them as much as money they needed, as much as allowances they needed. And secondly, they couldn't go up to the ladder because I was saying that the main aim was for the local government union Parishad member to go to the Upajila level and the Upajila level member to the MP level, but they couldn't do that because of the lack of resources, lack of social capital, and lack of money, political support from the political parties. So one issue may be obviously what I meant, that they have to be given training, not on the traditional issues, but to do capacity development of them, on the legislation, on leadership, on power. Another issue is they can have a peer-to-peer social capital. They can have a constituents to leadership social capital. There is a long way to go. There are loads of hurdles at this moment. And that's the reason that I was suggesting doing small scale, very light studies on very specific areas where women are being very successful and some areas when women are not being that successful, so that we can, and also as Professor Desai was mentioning, that this is a very common scenario in the South Asia because of the obviously socio-cultural milieu that we are going through. And we can find out that where women are doing better, what are the social cultural factors that we can address to. So there are many ways. One is legislation, obviously, which is there. Another one is giving them more capacity development scopes. And third one is actually encouraging them to have their own social capitals, bringing their strength into public, not as just service providers, at the same time, interactive leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those valuable knowledge and for giving us your valuable time. It's really a wonderful and successful session, I would like to say. Thanks a lot again. As the globe is facing a problem, we wish all of you a healthy and happy life ahead. And thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy. We have learned new things and diverse things which may help all of the researchers around the world to find new things to research and the government to find solutions regarding this topic. Thank you so much.
Uma, do we still have time? You sound like you're concluding.
Yeah, I have time already.
You have concluded?
No,
the session is over or
we
have
have time. We have time. Right, few more time. So you can take some comments or questions.
Are there any other questions? If not, I have 2 questions, but I'll first ask if anyone else wants to speak. Okay, I have one. Yes.
If anyone have no questions, I have some just comments and complimentations to honorable speaker. I mean, Dr. Denison, Salma Akhter, Mentor Ashif. Actually, he is the mentor of myself. Dr. Ashif is here. Debra, and of course, Professor Desai, and P.K Ghosh, and discussant Dr. Sakthi R Prabha. Dr. Shakti also my source of inspiration and power, morale. She is very active, and I just follow her to just follow her way of work and working together. I'll just add some points. Recently, you might see those who are in our Facebook, we just visited out of Dhaka, that is the district Natur, just to interact with some transgender in that particular area in association with another organization. And actually my team's mission was how we can change the attitude of the people to mainstream the transgender. And there was, a very renowned organization, Proshika, Honorable Director was with us, and he asked me, Mr. Habib, how it's possible to change the life pattern of the transgender, because government has given already their voting rights. They can actually take the nomination in election, national election, different kinds of other empowerment options, but still there is some lackings. Either they might not be interested to come to the mainstream, or the people don't love to give them the space to be mainstream, and most of the cases they are not interested to stay at home within the family members. Actually, so many questions were there by that my colleague actually from other organizations, and I just shared him the basic problem is they might not be interested. The government or other organizations, those who are supporting them, they might not be in right track. But problem is, who are they? Who are these transgender people, and how they've been created, and where they just came up to the society? So if you love to mainstream them, main thing is their surrounding environment that actually Professor Salma mentioned, and all the speakers in summary towards sustainability of community. If just we can take this as a social issue, as a problematic area, as a social worker, I just felt like that without changing the mindset that actually Mentor Ashif mentoring, that social mentorship, without mentoring the people or towards a positive mindset, it starts from the family, individual to community, then the entire nation. This cluster of people cannot be mainstream, cannot fulfill the needs that government is in target to achieve SDGs within 2030, and a long vision to be developed by 2041. In a recent study, I was in an alarming situation that the number of disability percentage declared around 10%, but this transgender people were not mentioned in that list. So it really alarmed me a lot, because thinking other disabled person, I think transgender are the most vulnerable because they cannot stay at home. Their family members, they are thinking that they are outcast, they are untouchable nowadays. The family cannot tolerate them, neighbors cannot tolerate them, the entire society cannot tolerate them. But my question is how they can be mainstream and empowered if you provide them logistics support, if you provide them entrepreneurship, if you provide them a shop, if you provide them a job, without coming, without interacting, without enhancing them towards a proper reciprocal relation with the community people, space in the community. If people not interested to come to their shop, to their salon, to their parlor, not interested to take service from them, if they drive a car, so how come they can be mainstream and empowered, and they can be interact with the main? Actually, that was my question, and I declared with my team that we will make a national movement, social movement toward changing attitude. Towards mainstreaming transgender through changing attitude of the people. I share it here that without changing our traditional mindset, we created the transgender, but we cannot recognize them as our child because of labeling by the society. This is a big challenge really these days. So towards sustainable development, living behind this group 10%, it's very difficult to have a sustainable community, sustainable society, and entire nation. So that's from me. Thanks again to all the speakers for wonderful discussion. And of course, Chair, you can have the lead after next 10 to 15 minutes to conclude the session, Professor Chair.
Mr. Amin, Mr. Muhammad Al Amin, you want to say something? No. Okay, I think we already had our discussion summarized. The last question raised by before social worker Habibur Rahman, what Ruma Parveen asked Professor Salma Akhter. I just want to add here, although I said India sounds very similar, Professor Akhter, data show that Bangladesh is ahead of India, whether it is the state policy or whether it is civil society work for political participation of women. Bangladesh is a model, although Bangladesh also has a lot of challenges and limitations, but it is truly a model today for the Asian countries. So I thought this point should not be missed out in saying that we have similar problems. Another intervention I wanted to make, since the main theme is on sustainable development goals, and we had this very thought-provoking presentation by Ms. Debra. Ms. Debra, are you still there?
I'm here.
Yeah, okay. I saw that you are heading this Institute of Wellbeing, and I'm sure you are doing research on social development, millennial development goals, sustainable development goals, and Human Development Index. I have always wondered, because I did a couple of studies on these indexes, and I've always wondered, why do we have Human Development Index independent of the Millennium Development Goals first, and then the Sustainable Development Goals now? So that is my first question to you. Why do we need these parallel processes, each one needing so many resources? And my second question to you is, has your institute worked on these goals for well-being? You know, that's what your the institute aim seems to be. Yeah, so I would like Ms. Debra to give a concluding remark on this very theme of sustainable development goals and all these different parallel processes. Ms. Debra.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Why do we have the Human Development Index? I would actually say that it doesn't go far enough. I wrote in my book, Beyond Apologies, about different measures, and Human Development Index, I think it's only 3 measures, and one of them is economics. And so it gives way too much emphasis to how much money people have. Simplest way to look at, one simple way to look at it, do you live in the village or do you live in the city? The same amount of money does not go the same way depending on where you live and what you have to buy. And obviously it's different in different countries. So the idea that money is at the heart of it and that the problem of poverty is simply a lack of money. And if we raise the amount of money people have in their hands, they won't be in poverty. You know, another simple example, in Bangladesh, garment workers started saying, stop raising our salaries, because all that happens is everybody in the community raises the prices on our rent, on our food, on everything. So our salary increase disappears. So this focus on money is wrong. The reason we have so many different indices is because the one that we're using the most, GDP, is failing us. And there's a fairly widespread consensus that it's failing. Unfortunately, that consensus, even though it's widespread, it hasn't necessarily reached people in NGOs or in the social work sector. So a lot of people who have very good hearts and want to do good in the world are measuring their progress wrong. And we're caught up. And the reason I wrote the book Beyond Apologies is that my NGO colleagues themselves apologize for saying we need to slow the economy to focus on environment or on social issues. And that idea that it's wrong to focus on something other than the economy, oops, is the problem. And but that's, you know, the measure we have, the measure we all hear about is GDP. So people who are frustrated come up with alternate measures, but they tend to still focus too much on income. And that's why I love gross national happiness, or what I refer to as gross national well-being, as used in Bhutan. It's something like 9 pillars with 36 indicators. And one that at least half of us in this session can appreciate is there's a question of how much time do you have to yourself? How much time do you spend working? And that no one should work more than 8 hours a day. Any group of people that works more than 8 hours a day, who cares about the national average? That group needs to be addressed. And you're nodding at me, I'm sure you know who the group is. Who in society tends to work far too many hours? It's women. And so one of the priorities of the Bhutanese government is to reduce the workload of women. So not only is it a much more broad way of looking at issues and looking at things that actually matter to people, the physical environment, education, situation of the elderly, et cetera, but it's also not simply an average. It's not just one number, which then you say, okay, on average, we're fine. And you ignore that the transgender people or people with disabilities or women are in a bad situation. Instead, they look at these 36 indicators across different population groups, and any group that's falling behind is considered important, and this should be addressed. And when I read this, I learned about this, I was so excited because this truly spoke to me, that averages are just ridiculous. Like one of the jokes is, let's say Bill Gates walks into our conference, the average economic value or earnings of each person in the conference would go way up if we averaged him in. But that wouldn't make any of us individually wealthier. So these focus on averages, this putting too much emphasis on economics is the problem. At the Institute, we don't actually do a lot of research. What I do a lot of is, in fact, mentoring. I have a lot of students who come as interns, especially from Asian University for Women. So we have a lot of young women from different Asian countries. And my job, as I perceive it, is to encourage them in their idealism and help them to find a practical expression for it. And since I'm getting the chance to speak at the end of this plenary, I just want to emphasize the importance of that too often in society, our young people are told to be practical, to be pragmatic, to think about what job, how much it pays, what nice things they can buy. And they're not taught to hold on to their values. And I meet a lot of very talented young people from very good universities who are sad. And this is before coronavirus, they're sad not because they can't go out, they're sad because they're being told that their values are not important. And what they should value is money and possessions. Coming from the United States of America, I've seen how that overemphasis on possessions, on consumption, harms people's souls, and it makes them very sad. And people who have been able to walk away from that, to be less materialistic, to live not so much as consumers, but as citizens, as truly somebody concerned about the place that you're in and the natural environment and how people are doing, those people are the ones who are thriving. They may not have as much money, they may not have a big home or a car, but they're on their bicycle, they go to parks, they have true connections with their family and with their friends. They're doing work that has meaning. And to me, that's the most important thing we can give to people. So this idea that we should be working at how do we increase people's income so they can buy more things, and well-being is all about possessions and our material level of well-being. And happiness surveys show repeatedly that often the happiest people in the world are not the people with the most money, they're the ones with the strongest social connections. So the fact that we're at this conference and that is the key issue is wonderful, but we have to remember that young people are constantly getting negative messages, and we need to encourage them and help them through mentorship, through internship opportunities, through media, any way we can, that the things that truly matter, that will truly make us happy, it's not about money, it's not about consumption. And the beautiful part about that, I actually have to run to another meeting with people talking about the climate crisis. If we really did value our human connections and our natural environment over consumption, the world, the planet would be in much better shape. And the more that we can step away from this focus on GDP and consumption, the more we focus on human connections and nurturing each other and our environment, the more we will be able to combat the climate crisis and fight these pandemics like coronavirus and have a good situation for ourselves, as well as creating, not just handing over the planet as it is to next generations, but actually restoring a lot of what the harm has been done, turning the planet back into something more like what we had as children, so that future generations can continue to make improvements instead of just trying to limit the destruction, that would give us all true meaning in our lives, true happiness that would also be compatible with the needs of other species on this planet. So I'm just encourage all of us to keep our focus on that. And if people say to us, well, what about the economy? Say, you know what? If you're measuring the economy as GDP, it is meaningless, it is valueless. And what we need to look at is the life of our planet. And that is the true economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Debra. So now I very briefly conclude. We have covered a very wide range from history to future, from development to happiness. And I would say yes, although we don't value economic development, we value poverty eradication very much. So from poverty eradication to micro entrepreneurial enterprises, from issues of women and transgender to an integrated approach through community covering all the stakeholders. I think we have had a very fruitful session today, looking at sustainable development from all these different angles. And we take away lots of new thoughts, lots of need for changing mindsets. It's like somebody's written in the chat, we need to change, not the transgenders, right? So it's our attitudes, our mindsets, and especially as social work professionals, it's absolutely important that we really keep reflecting on how our attitudes, our own mindsets affect the people with whom we work and how we need to change first. Thank you very much for this lovely session. Thank you, the organizers, for bringing us all together. Namaste.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you from CSWPD Foundation, People's University of Bangladesh, and other associations. Thanks all. Distinguished panel speakers, P.K Ghosh, Dada, Namaste. Poonam Gulalia is here, Mentor Ashif, Professor Salma Akhter, Denison. Actually, I always disturb Dr. Denison. Always I was just knocking him. You all are my inspiration and participant. Just one announcement. Today we have another session, just Bangladesh time, 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Actually, this is the group from Mexico, Cuba, Costa Rica, Argentina, North American part, and some friends will join, 2 friends from India, another from Nigeria and Kenya, 2 other speakers. So hope you will join, and we will share the link in the group. And already we email you the program detail. There is the link, just click and join on time. So hope to see you again. Thanks, and please stay safe. Keep in your prayers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.